I'm Tom Landy. I'm the director of the McFarland Center for Religion, Ethics, and Culture. The McFarland Center sponsors a variety of lectures, discussions, conferences, and other programs that foster dialogue on questions of meaning, morality, and mutual obligation. Today's lecture is an opportunity for us to welcome another one of our International Visiting Jesuit Fellows to Holy Cross. The program is sponsored with the generosity of the Holy Cross Jesuit community and gives us the opportunity to bring Jesuits from around the world to expose Holy Cross students to the global Jesuit community, give them a chance for sabbatical and research so they get a chance to study, teach, and participate in the life of the college. This spring, we are hosting a bumper crop of International Visiting Jesuit Fellows. Father Tommy Nishant is in the back, teaching sociology. He's from St. Xavier's College of Management and Technology in Patna, India, where he was formerly the head. Father Ferenc Patch is in the middle, a native of Hungary who teaches at the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome. Father Selva Ratnam is over here, professor and former president of the Jnanadeepa Vidyapith, the JDV, as I can say much more comfortably, the Pontifical Athenaeum in Pune in India. And today's lecturer, Father Joachim Zoundi, who will discuss evil, sin, and traditional African religion and Christian revelation, and has a great slide to get us started on that. Father Zoundi is a native of Burkina Faso, where he tells me his jacket was made, so he's wearing that to bring Burkina to us. He is a lecturer in systematic theology at Hekima University in Nairobi, Kenya, and also child protection officer at Hekima University, and the first director of the Jesuit Center for Safeguarding in Africa. Studying at the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome, Father Zoundi's scholarship focused on Christian anthropology and the link between St. Augustine and St. Ignatius of Loyola on their vision of humanity. At Holy Cross, Father Zoundi is teaching a religious studies seminar titled Humanity in Uncertain Times, and these are uncertain times. Father Zoundi is also dedicating time to researching the dynamic of interpersonal relationships in Burkina Faso that can help make peace and reconciliation possible among different ethnic and tribal groups, and will propose how it might be used in other situations of difficult coexistence in the world. Please join me in welcoming Father Zoundi.
Thank you, everyone, and welcome to this conference. As you can see, the title is Evil and Sin in the African Traditional Religion and the Christian Revelation. The first slide you see put us on, in fact, the question of humanity. The Revelation tells us, as slaves of sin, you were not under obligation to righteousness. The human condition without the revelation is in this step. But what I want to stress on is to see that in this second image, you see that we find ourselves always in a crossroad. To operate what to choose is not always easy. You need to be trained to discern. You need to handle better your own heart. To begin with, I can say that human beings are beings of questions. They question themselves for their own meaning, they question the meaning of the world. And at the same time, there is a paradox. Human person is a paradox in himself. He is longing for bliss, and at the same time, he causes his own curse. In front of evil, the own curse is evil and sin, human being is victim and actor. How then to find real bliss for humanity? And this is the problematic. Many human societies have tried to sort out the brokenness, the bothering problem of evil and sin. I will consider the African traditional religion that I abbreviate ATR, it's an international recognized cycle, attempt to sort out the problem in different steps. We'll talk about the context and define what is African religion, traditional religions, what is sin in this context, what is the second step, what is the origin of this sin and evil, then what are the consequences, and finally, how they sort it out, what they propose as a way of dealing with the issue. Then we will come back at the last point with the approach of the Christian revelation as proposes an approach to evil and sin. The first point, nature, reason, and sin and evil. In African traditional religion, ATR is a belief in which does not have written literature. Yet, paradoxically, such faith is written everywhere for those who are able to see and read. It is written in the experience of people. Its expressions are largely written in people mythology, mythological explanation of things and of the world, in their songs, rites, liturgies, shrines, proverbs. This kind of faith does not have a known founder, yet it leads many African people. And when you go through Africa, you will notice that, people still grasp the roots of their own native religion, because it makes them close to their ground. For John Beatty, African traditional religion has been coined by the questioning of the experiences of the African forefathers. And this is important. In this way, they set in place perennial beliefs in order to safeguard and express through myth and proverbs, laws and customs to preserve the good of their communities in their very existence itself. Africans are deeply rooted in the belief of a supreme being who uses mediators to communicate with them. These mediators vary from human beings, such as the ancestors, priests, diviners, and pleiades of good spirit and divinities. Abraham Otuye writes that the African traditional religion are the result of African being spontaneous recognition of a kind of cosmic power. It's important, the cosmic power, which is immanent in their world. So we don't handle him, he is there, we don't know how to deal always with him, but we deal with his intermediaries. Therefore, sin in this context, in the belief of the ATR, means a violation of acceptable moral standards of the society. Sin is a violation of the moral standard. This violation may be in speech, action, or reaction. Another researcher, Conradi, is from the same opinion when he says that in African religion and culture, both human sin and evil are perceived in terms of breaking of peace, relationship within the community. The focus is about community problem, issues. We come back to John Beatty again. Sin is the disruption. It's a disruption of the social order and peace, which are essential and sacred in African society. Such disruption could be at times an act of evil spirit, and this is very important. Evil spirit play a great role there. For it is believed that the evil spirit can take possession of people's life, and also some individual within the community manipulate these forces to accomplish their evil deeds. This usually transpires in the form of witchcraft and sorcery. You can see an example familiar to you. It's not just in Africa, it's in the world. Well, there's something else. In general, in African cultures and traditional religion mindset, evil and sin come mainly from the influence of evil spirit on human beings. Evil spirits are the reason where there is unrest within the community. This is important to know. First, they attack people and cause illness and thereby cause people to point fingers to each other. They destroy the unity of the community. Secondly, and more importantly, with the aid of these forces, those who want to cause misery and make life difficult for others do so without any difficulty. It's a kind of leaguing, siding with the evil. We can say that it appears that sin seems to be the result of contamination of evil through the possession of evil spirit on human beings. However, individual human guilt is usually acknowledged in African worldwide and moral philosophy according to Beatty, Turner, Sawyer, Adegbola, and Poby. However, one still remains surprised because even if in African cultures and religion, the responsibility for sin is individually recognized, yet it is mainly attributed to external influence by the evil spirit. The evil spirit plays the main role. And one wonders, why is that so? Corradi thinks that because African society are generally ruled with a sense of honor and shame, this makes hard to acknowledge simply the responsibility of the society rulers in public. You cannot shame a king. Respect has to be given him. In a society where, I'm quoting, where social patterns are governed by a sense of honor and shame, it is extremely difficult to accept responsibility for wrongdoing publicly. A confession of guilt is therefore often repressed. Guilt is something that is widely recognized but remains hidden deep beneath the surface. It is present only as the unspeakable. You don't talk about everything everywhere. To know that you have done wrong, and so fear that this may become public knowledge causes immense unrest, anxiety, as it is expressed in the Xhosa notion of Izazela, South Africa, which is issued to refer to being haunted by an acute sense of guilt, which may manifest itself in psychosomatic illness and intense suffering. Another researcher, Kasomo, sees three dimensions of evil: the physical evil, the mental suffering, and finally, the moral evil, wickedness. The moral wickedness is the cause of the first two, to say physical evil and mental evil. Because a great deal of human suffering and pain comes from our capacity to be inhuman. This pain includes such major scourges such as poverty, persecution, wars. Although a great deal of pain and suffering are caused by human actions, there is much more that arise from such natural causes as bacteria, virus, we have COVID-19, the earthquakes, storms, fire, lightning, flood, drought, etc. Another type of evil can be identified in mental evil. To understand well the impact and reality of sin in African context, one has to be aware of the African cultural context. African society are, generally speaking, community-oriented, in which many people are connected, families, family members, clans, various societal groups, and organization of the community, and all this is a strong bound. In such context, we can understand with the author that sin does the exact opposite of the will of the deity, and therefore it consists in any immoral behavior, ritual mistakes, any offenses closer to God or man, breach of covenant, breaking of taboos. There's a lot of taboos in the society. And doing some other things regarded as abominable and polluting, since in African traditional religion cannot be noted in isolation. It is associated with God and man. So even if evil and sin are linked to community and wellness, they are also for a great part problem of individual human heart wickedness. And this is also important. Yes, there is a part of the disturbing the community, but agent of evil can be individual people. Where are sin and evil coming from? After the general context, we try to see the origin of evil and sin. A good understanding of the cosmology of African traditional religion is of help to step into the origin of evil and sin. There is no clear-cut understanding about the origin of evil and sin in ATR. For some society, evil and sin originated from or even in association with spiritual beings other than God. God is never the source of evil and sin. And generally, such conception is a personification of evil. John Beatty, reporting on the Wugusu people, says that they believe that there is an evil divinity which was created good by God, but then became evil, turning against God and began to do evil. Some people will contest saying that this is a copy of the Christian revelation, but this evil divinity associates to himself evil spirit, and all evil comes from that lot. He added that there are people who consider death, epidemics, and other major calamities as divinity in themselves or caused by divinities. Dead people are considered to become evil to the living, for it is believed that when human spirits become detached from human contact, people experience or fear them as evil or harmful. Some are believed to possess individual and cause various diseases like epilepsy and madness. If the dead are not properly buried, or have a grudge, are neglected, or are not obeyed when they give instruction, it is thought that they take revenge and punish the offender. That's why death is carefully treated and treated with fear in a way. In this case, it is human beings who provoke the spirit of the dead and act in evil ways. It's not always an easy thing to sort out. In this context, evil is perceived as an independent entity, yet which cannot act on its own, but uses human or spiritual agents to act evil. People can become incarnation of evil power. That is why many in Africa believe that there are certain classes of people, age group, clans, among others. For example, those with red eyes, you encounter somebody with strange eyes. People believe that he is a witch, he is an evil person. Squinted eyes, shrift people, very old single people, greedy. When your behavior is not explainable, people attribute to you to belong to that kind of people. Who possess this potentially destructive power, it is believed that such people can harm their victim just by uttering evil words or gazing at you, applying some witchcraft, magic, or sorcery. So after the origin, we see what are the consequences of evil and sin in this ATR. Awolalu holds that delinquency of human beings create a gap between themselves and God. Human being disobedience to God or to his functionaries, the divinities, ancestors, isolate him from God and disrupt the total well-being and is punished with tragic penalties. For a man to bypass over God's fellowship and training is to incur God's displeasure and to carry misfortune, pain, and death upon himself. Thus sins bring war, suffering, and sadness. Sin is generally considered in ATR, African traditional religion, as linked to illness of all kinds. When people feel not doing or being well in their lives, they are inspired to confess their hidden violations of the society, on the society policies, hoping to be helped and forgiven. For in the ATR context, constant misfortune, incurable disease, customary penury have been all constructed as warning signs that the supernatural power have been punishing and unconfessed sin in the existence of a man or a woman so afflicted. So the consequences of sin look like the notion of the doctrine of retribution in the Christian mindset in the Old Testament. For if a man, a human being, lives in obedience to God's will, practically following the rules of the community, he will be blessed. But if he transgresses the laws and custom of the society and goes against the will of God, he will receive illness and curse as punishment of his misdeeds. Zerafa, in an article on the subject published first in Angelicum, as a university in Rome, and republished in G-Store, gives a simple definition of retribution as a suitable return for man's activity, reward for good done, punishment for evil. Okay. One can see the semblance of the two concepts in ATR and as well as the Judeo-Christian religion. We may add that forgiveness of sin exists in African traditional religion. In fact, sins are forgiven through the means of purification. You can go to be washed, purify, confession, sacrifices, and reparation, and through such process, the sinner recovers remission of his sins and becomes acceptable to the deity and can escape from punishment. After that, we come out with what could be the response to the tragic situation of evil and sin in the African mindset. But before arriving there, we just start to evaluate what we have seen until now. The first conclusion about what we have seen is that, and sin on evil, is that they have their origin mostly outside human responsibility in the ATR cosmogony. A second conclusion is that sin is mainly sin against the community, setting a disruption called to be repaired. In addition to that, it seems that the consequences of sin and evil are only limited to this world. The afterlife seems not to be touched by evil and sin. I have also perceived that human responsibility for his own sins seems to be overlooked by the attribution of the source of evil to external actors, divinities, and spirits. The origin of and reason of evil and sin remain quite vague. In addition to that, for Kasomo, the question of salvation in ATR is quite marginal, if not inexistent. He is quoting Okorosha. Observe that salvation is never experienced once for all, or awaited as futuristic eschaton, but rather encountered and experienced situationally and in context. There is no evidence in which people ask to be saved from an evil or a moral nature, or from an evil which may have intervened between God and man. African religion has not produced doctrine or concept of spiritual salvation. The solution to sin and evil seems to have been found in the concept of Ubuntu. What is that? Ubuntu is a complex term originated from Nguni language. People from South Africa, Swaziland, Zimbabwe, and you can add Tanzania and so on. It is also a Zulu and Xhosa language. The term Ubuntu is well known as correct behavior. What does it mean? In the relationship with one another, Ubuntu refers to behaving well towards others or acting in ways to benefit the community. Such act could be as simple as helping a stranger in need or much more complex ways of relating with others. A person who behaves in these ways has Ubuntu. He or she is a full person. Ubuntu can be considered as the sole force, and this is important. And when someone has Ubuntu, he can act selflessly. The late Bishop Desmond Tutu described Ubuntu as following: my humanity is caught up, is inextricably bound up in what you are. We have the same faith, in a way. Ubuntu calls for forgiveness and reconciliation instead of vengeance. Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu, beside many others such as Mbiti, spread worldwide the term Ubuntu. Ubuntu embodies virtues that maintains harmony, encourages sharing among members of the community. In attempt to translate it came the following meaning: humanity towards others. And the belief is a universal bond of sharing that connects all humanity. To give a quick and strong summary on Ubuntu, I refer to the Zimbabwean historiographer Stan Lake, who gave 3 maxims to express the core of Ubuntu. He says, to be human is to affirm one humanity by recognizing the humanity of the others, and on that basis, establish respectful human relation with them. If and when one is faced with a decisive choice between wealth and the preservation of the life of another human being, then one should opt for the preservation of life. If you do that, you have Ubuntu. And finally, the king owes his status, including all the powers associated with it, to the will of the people under him. It is not an dominatarian rulers. Such elements belong to African political philosophy. And if people apply them, it results a qualitative change in the societies. But the problem remains, how can people apply it? One of the advantages of the ATR morals and Ubuntu principle is the communitarian dimension that is taken into serious consideration that could be build a better world, but how can African humanity do that? How I evaluate this attempt to solving the issue of disharmony in African society with the help of Ubuntu. First of all, I acknowledge the effort of Africans to come out with a beautiful concept that has some incidences in making our society more human and harmonious. However, we know that despite this theory, Africa suffers from many problems due to the permanence of evil and sin despite the concept of Ubuntu. This means that the mere human effort to counter evil or sin cannot be efficient enough to get rid of sin and evil and restore harmony, which the human heart longed for from the beginning. Where then to find a deep answer to evil and sin? We pass to the second point and the last one. The evil and sin in the Christian revelation. In the Catholic doctrine, sin and evil are part of the mystery of our lives. According to the Thomist insight, evil is defined as absence of good. In this sense, evil cannot be equal to God, it is only a lack of something. St. Augustine of Hippo, in his De Genesis ad Litteram, his comment of the Genesis, stresses on the fact that God created human being in goodness without sin and evil. Evil and sin enter into the world by the jealousy of the devil. We can see it in the wisdom, in the book of the wisdom. In this difficult question of evil and sin, perversity in our humanity, I found particularly relevant what Pierre Gibert, wrote on the topic. Gibert posits that to understand well the question of original sin and evil in the Bible and in the story of the people of Israel, there are some prerequisites to take into account. Explaining how Israel came to write about the fall of Genesis 3, Gibert says that first of all, Israel experienced the salvific action of God in Egypt. The first element Israel perceived is God of salvation. They were in difficult situation, they were redeemed by the powerful God of Abraham and Isaac. Yet the elected people realized by then that despite the fact of God's salvific action on their behalf, they noticed that evil and sin were pervasive in themselves as well as individual, as community. They saw evil doing in pharaohs ruling and dominion on them, and all the sufferings they endure in slavery. They experienced also that even among them, the best among them, such as Moses and later David, the great kings, were sinners, and the people as a group or community sinned many times against their God. To give clarity to sin and evil, Israel, once they were settled in the promised land, wrote their history with their God through their own experience of being graced by Yahweh and yet still remaining faithful, sinful as individual and as community. They put the creation story at the beginning of the salvation history, for grace and salvation were what they experienced first, and what makes them become aware about sin and evil despite God's goodness to them. The narrative of the fall in the book of Genesis asserts the universality of evil and sin, stressing on the human personal responsibility for they disobeyed God's order. This is done not using the mythological language of the neighboring people without being mere myth. For Gibert, mythological stories deal with God and man relationship in which men are always losers and there is a fight between these gods. In the case of the Bible narrative, there is no mythology. The Biblical Commission of on the 30th June 1909, and then Singer 21:22, according to them, the narrative of the three chapters are not mythological, because we have a different type of relation between a personal God and concrete human beings, which relationship is of respect, benevolence from God who loves and saves. The Christian doctrine on sin tells us that there is a serious matter, and yet humanity is helped to overcome it through the collaboration of the redemption of Christ, the Son of the living God, who became man to redeem us all. In so doing, Christianity proposes a clear way of coming out from the fear of spirit and divinities, which could be seen as malefic, such as the case of ATR, and to strengthen humanity through the words of St. Paul in his letter to the Romans. God, indomitable love in Christ, we know that all things work for the good of those who love God. So there is no curse for those who believe in God. And those he predestined, he has called, and those he have called, he has also justified. Those he have justified, he have glorified. It is Jesus who died, rather was raised, who also is at the right hand of God, who indeed intercede for us. What will separate us from the love of Christ? This is the solution to evil and death and sin. Christian revelation tells us about the origin of evil and sin and what they are. But more importantly, it gives us the way and means to fight and win against them. And happily, even if our modern world is dominantly Christian, we don't see their capacity to change the world. As far as Christians don't live out of their faith to change the world, other religion will still relevant. To conclude, evil and sin are data of concern for mankind. All cultures and religions have always tried to sort them out, but not all have succeeded to come out with a valuable answer to the worries of human heart, which is restless. The fearful context of ATR is not at all solved by the recourse to Ubuntu, for it relies on mere human effort. Only the Christian revelation, which leads us to much more harmonious relation with the revealed God of love, forgiveness, and grace, reconciles us and shows us the way to live a meaningful life already on this earth, and then with him when our earthly home will be destroyed. The first letter of St. John could be a good conclusion in this conference in its ability to focus us as believers on the God of the revelation. Here is what John writes. Beloved, this is the message we have heard from Jesus Christ and proclaimed to you, that God is light and in him is no darkness at all. If we say we have fellowship with him while we walk in darkness, we lie and do not live according to the truth. But if we walk in the light, as he is the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus, his Son, cleanses us from our sins. Thank you for listening.